Welcome to OTP, On the Podium, with your host, Mark Goodrum. His guest today is a musician, composer, graphic artist, and educator, Kathy Dee Saville, and now OTP.
Welcome, Kathy. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Doing good, Mark. Good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for taking the time today. We appreciate it. Well, let's jump right in. And I'm so glad you're here because you're one of the people I know that loves music. It's in your soul and in your heart. Talk a little bit about how you started. What was it like in your home having music and how you got your start playing music?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So after we spoke earlier and I wrote down a few thoughts about that, I realized that I've got some ancestors who were musicians. I remembered that my paternal grandpa played violin, or they called it fiddle then, and he would play at weddings and dances and so on. And then my maternal grandmother taught piano lessons, and she was such a good musician that she was sent to a music school for girls, which in those days was unheard of and, quite different. So, and then when I was a kid, we always had LPs. My folks had a lot of LPs, and we had a big old upright piano. My mother played piano, and I was given piano lessons starting in first grade. So yeah, there was a lot of music going on.
And so there was a lot of music going on in the family, and and at school. How was that falling into place with you?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to attend a private school that basically would have now be called like probably a music charter school. It was it was a parochial school where they really focused on music, and so I had 8 years of everything you could think of. Intensive vocal, choir. I learned to read music. We sang in the choir, and we competed.
Now, where was this at? Where was this at?
It was in a small town in northern Iowa where I grew up.
Okay.
And that's where I got my music education, and it was fantastic, really. I'm very blessed that I had that experience.
Yeah, that really is amazing to me that, you had this opportunity at such a young age.
And it was just this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. And also I played organ in the church, and which was not exactly my, first choice, but I was very strongly recommended for the job.
And what age was this at?
I think I started at like maybe 7th or 8th grade, maybe 6th or 7th grade. Yeah.
Right. That is great.
And it was this huge pipe organ. It was just this beautiful, amazing, enormous. And so it was this huge keyboard with several different tiers, and you get to noodle around, and it bellowed out. It was really cool. So that was fun.
Wow. What an experience at such a young age. That's great. Now, you talked about in your little note that you gave me, the nuns in elementary school. Talk a little bit about that. I found that fascinating.
So they just really insisted on us learning all of this. And then, they were strict, and it was like, you either learn how to do all this or die. And so I wanted to live. And then when I was very small, when I first started, I had an elderly nun who was my teacher, and I'd be playing away and terribly because I never really did get very good, and she'd doze off, and then if I stopped, then she'd wake up and rap my knuckles, and it was just like a SNL skit or something. It was just crazy. She was ancient, but they really encouraged us, and in every which way, vocal, and thank God I learned how to read music, because a lot of people can't even read music, and it's a real gift to be able to do that. So, yeah,
So, and do you think at that point in your life that you knew such a young age how valuable that music was, or were you just going through life, at a young age, doing, like you said, doing what the nuns told you to do?
yes, I'd have to agree with that. And it was just life. It was just what I did, what we did. And so I didn't think it was anything unusual.
Right. Talk to us a little bit about your transition to go to guitar. How did that happen?
Well, for one thing, the piano was always in my life. It was always my mother's idea. And I never did completely take to it. It just seemed really linear, like it just seemed too like linear. And it was intimidated me with the black, with the white keys and the black keys. And so for some reason, then when I discovered guitar, when I discovered strings, I just took to it like a duck to water. I was just like, oh, okay, now I get this. For some reason, I intuitively sort of got it, and I just never looked back. And I never was that great on keyboard.
Right.
So.
Right. The guitar sound resonated in your mind, so to speak. Is that fair to say?
Yes. I love strings. Yeah.
Speaking of that, I mean, did you ever think about violin or cello or the orchestra path, or it didn't cross your mind?
I never did, Mark, and I never looked back. And once I got into guitar, and I felt like I was home, very much, and still am at home with the guitar. And I've never even thought about looking at another instrument. And I guess I'm instrument monogamous. But I know other musicians who will be like, oh, you know what? I'm learning how to play mandolin, or oh, I'm learning. Yeah. And I'm always like, wow, that is really admirable, because I don't think I could easily. I mean, I've fooled around with mandolin and, auto harp and some other stringed things, but nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's never too late.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Don't say that too loud. My guitar's right behind me. She might hear you.
I know how you feel. Now let's get into your process. You've written music. You're also a great artist, visual artist. There. Talk about your writing your lyrics and your process with that.
Yes. So. As far as like writing a song, like how it happens is, I just feel like, as most of us are, I'm constantly processing emotions and impressions of the world around me and memories and making associations, and somehow that just comes together sometimes. And like, I just wrote a little Christmas ditty, a little song, and how I wrote that, I woke up and I had the lyrics in my head.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I scribble it down really quick, and that's usually how it happens, Mark. It's, I just start to kind of download, this little verse, like, a little rhyme, little rhyme about something. And then, so I have to write it down. And then after I write it down, then I tweak it a little, and then I pick up the guitar, and then I start just experimenting with different chords and notes along with, melodies, and putting that together with some of the verse. And it just sort of organically, I don't know, evolves. That's all. I don't know how else to describe it. And it's just sort of springs forth, I guess that's kind of a cliche, but that's really how it happens.
Because I find that fascinating for, I mean, I've written a couple of pieces for me, but I never really got into that aspect of composing and so forth. So I would like to, paint a picture, pardon the pun, of for our listeners to get an idea of how one comes through that process. And so for you to get inspired by something in your life with the lyrics, and then to transfer that musically. And we all know that in life, there are some people that will have someone else that will put the instrumental part to the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
But you do that both there. I find it really a great talent to do that, and then have this element to come out and give joy to people through their ears. That's great. I think that's really outstanding talent for you to be able to do.
Well, thank you. And, I have often thought about this, and I don't even know if I can take credit for this because it's just something that comes naturally. That I'm not even sure I earned it. Like I didn't go and take classes or study, or
Right,
some people just bust their
Uh-huh.
butts to learn how to write a song or learn how to write
Sure. Yeah.
poetry, which is really what I'm doing. I write
hmm
poetry,
All right.
verse, and then it comes to me, and then I put it to music. And
Mhm.
I think it probably has to do with, it's just based on that whole foundation of music and musical
Right.
education I've had my life. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well, it's also, don't you think you're tapping into your emotions? Yeah.
yes,
I mean, and
definitely.
that is really, I mean, not to get too dramatic about it, but that's deep, because some of us as human beings, I mean, some of us try to hide our emotions. They don't want to really uh, um, be honest with our emotions about various things, because it can be happy, it can be sad. I mean, I do address, like, for example, when my mom passed away, I wrote a piece to play on the sax at her celebration of life. So, that's a very personal task that you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
and the other
Mm-hmm.
part of your life, talk about, that's a nice way to get into your other part of your life, of you're a graphic artist. You paint, and talk about that. Is that process so much different than your musical side?
I've given this a lot of thought, Mark, and I, I don't know what to say. It's just two different things. They're so different, and
uh,
um, I
Come on
just
now, Kathy. You're on a podcast. You
I'm
have to lay it
sorry.
all out.
I'm trying to act very authoritative, but I just, and also I haven't I haven't ever combined the two really.
uh-huh.
Um, People have suggested, oh, why don't you do something to combine your art and your music,
Right.
and
Right.
do some sort of maybe a performance thing. And it just hasn't really gelled because to me, they're kind of two different things.
Okay.
I think that, you know, for instance, I don't just go, oh, I'm going to sit down and write a song today.
Yeah.
I never do that.
Right.
I'm like, it comes from somewhere else. But like with painting, you have the freedom to say, I think I'm going to get out my, paints and canvas and
Uh-huh.
what else, and just, I'm going to paint today, and I'm going
Mhm.
to, and you might have an idea,
Right.
but it's a very different process because you're using your hands with a paintbrush or with a
Sure.
pencil, and it's more well, it's visual, you
Sure.
know,
Sure. Yeah.
and so that's a very different type of thing. And then there's different guidelines for that, and then you're
Right.
working with color
Yeah. Yeah.
and with dimension and visual um, constructs that that you're not using in music. Music is entirely, emotional and audio. And like, for instance, I don't write my music down ever.
hmm
Like some people write it they score it.
Sure. Sure.
I don't do that. I write the lyrics. I type up or write the lyrics.
hmm
Then I work out the chords, and then I go back and I
hmm
write the chord like A,
Right. Right.
or E
Yeah.
minor. and so on above whatever lyric I'm going to change to that chord.
Right.
So it's in that way, it's not even that visual that I would write down like the notes or whatever, or score it. Because people say, "Oh, can I have a score of your song?" I don't know. No, just listen.
Yeah.
So
make a copy.
Yeah. And I think, but both art forms spring from, expressing, I think, emotions and an interior life that most people have. But as you say, Mark, some people are not comfortable with expressing their emotions or innermost thoughts or impressions. And I guess maybe that's the difference, because artists and musicians have given themselves permission to do that and to express it into an art form. And like I personally don't care. I don't have any skin in the game if somebody doesn't like my songs or my music. I don't care. I do it for myself.
Right. Yes. Now that's a great way to move into that next area, because that is that personal connection relationship that you have with your music and your art, of course, your visual art. You like you said, you're not saying, okay, I've got to bring in a paycheck at the end of the month with this. So you're doing it pure for the love of the feeling of sharing that music, sharing that art with the people that see, but also for yourself. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's just about sums it up.
Okay, yeah, and I just think that is the essence of true music. We do have the audience listening and appreciative by showing and clapping and so forth, dancing and with the music and so forth. But to have someone saying, okay, this is how I feel, and laying it out there. You also, how do you feel about, you're taking that chance, you put it out there on a YouTube video, and putting that emotion on your sleeve. How do you feel about that?
I guess I'm not too concerned about it. I imagine, sometimes I put my songs on Facebook, as you know, and I imagine if somebody wrote something really mean, it might hurt my feelings, but nobody ever has. I mean,
right.
But so I just do it because I enjoy it, and
sure.
Like if somebody else hears it and enjoys it and feels touched by that, then mission accomplished, because that's even better. So I feel like in my process of, creating songs and music and verse and expressing, I don't know, I think a lot of it is universal sort of stuff, universal emotions. And I think that if, helping other people to relate to that and to say, oh yes, that's how I feel, and that struck a chord with me, and then you feel grateful that you can have that to plug into, and to relate to. And I think we all feel that way about the music we love.
Yeah, you tapped into.
That makes sense.
No, absolutely. I hear what you're saying. You tapped into that. We all, as human beings, have these same emotions, whether we want to efface them or not. And that's a nice way to get into. We have a clip of one of your pieces you've played. I believe you have an accompaniment in this piece. You want to talk? Let me play it for you, and you can set it up here and talk about it. So let me play it for you first.
Lonnie was a friend of mine, a twinkle in his eyes. Played the banjo tiny and always cracking wise. Lonnie used to wear a grin while he sang and played.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a song I wrote for my friend Lonnie, who passed away fairly recently, actually, last October. And he was an amazing person and touched a lot of lives. He was a musician himself, an amateur musician himself, Mark. And he taught himself banjo.
Oh, wow.
He played banjo, and I met him in Iowa City when I was associated with all these musicians who were not pros, who were just like me, who we found each other. We did this for our own enjoyment and for others who were in our circle. And he came into a circle, and he had been in the Vietnam War, and he had PTSD really badly. And he had a Purple Heart because he'd been injured. And for his therapy, when he returned home, he took up music, and he taught himself to play guitar. And he really immersed himself in the world of bluegrass. And he used to call it old-timey music. Old-timey. That's what he called it. Yeah. And he decided he wanted to dedicate himself to keeping that genre alive and to teaching others. And so he introduced me and all these, I'd never even heard of that.
Right.
And that's kind of, and it's a very American art form, and you know, it's related to bluegrass and country. And so so many people knew him and touched their lives, and he performed a lot, you know, on a amateur basis, not like he was ever, you know, nationally known or anything, but around the area, play at different functions. He even made a few music CDs that he self-produced. Anyway, so long story short, he just really touched my life and touched my heart, and so I wrote this song about him, and it just sort of came to me. And the song itself, I wrote it in the genre, like his type of bluegrassy, old-timey, you know, genre. And so it's my dedication to him. And I was playing guitar.
Right. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's great. Now, you know, in that area, you know, with Lonnie, and talk about to our listeners, those that might want to start to play. I know you said you brought in your husband. I was talking about an accompaniment. You brought in your husband's playing now. Those that, you know, may want to start playing music at some point in life, maybe you know, I'm too old, I don't know how to read music, I don't know whether I can do it. Talk to people like that.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're never too old. And
preach it.
I saw this little, you know, quote not too long ago that said, "It's never too late to live happily ever after." So
there you go.
I feel like, especially for people who are interested in aging differently or aging more fully, that, like, I think music or taking up an instrument, or, you know, picking up your instrument that you put down a long time ago, is an excellent way to, you know, get your feet wet and to kind of rejuvenate yourself, because, as you know, Mark, music keeps us young. Music engages your head and your heart and your hands and your eyes, and you have to keep sharp, because, you know, you have to know the notes, and you have to the scales, and then you have to know the timing and the beat, and it's all like, you really have to, and it's so good for you, you know, for anybody, but especially, I would say, people that are older. And it just enriches your life so much. And so I think that for anybody who's thinking about that, and you don't, like, I don't necessarily read music at this point. I mean, I'm glad I know how to read music, but you can learn a lot. Like, when I became acquainted with that group of musicians in Iowa City, and we would jam, we would just get together at people's houses, you know, or on the porch, and we would jam. And I learned a lot from the other musicians.
Sure.
So that's what you can do, as you know, because you work with some other groups of people, and it's like osmosis. You learn from each other. Right? You pick up things, you absorb things, whether intentionally or subconsciously. And so that's one way that if somebody feels rusty and they're thinking, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't. Well, find a group of like-minded people who, they just, like, there's people who jam, like if you look around your community, there's a Sunday afternoon jam at some place, and you can join something like that without any pressure. Didn't Ed Briggs used to have at the school where we worked? Didn't he used to have a bluegrass jam there?
Bluegrass jam. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
At the school. Yeah. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and in some aspects, you can't take it too seriously. Just get out there and even if it's not musically, like with an instrument, dancing and moving the body, and and it doesn't have to be in public, and just be at home in your living room, or just in your den, tapping your foot, and whatever you can do, and you've brought music to a lot of people's hearts, and we appreciate it, Kathy, and we really appreciate you coming in and taking the time. And anything else you like to leave the audience with about music and your life, and before we put a bow on it, let us know.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you having me, and it's an honor, and I've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for considering my story to be worthy of being told, and maybe it would help and inspire others, because it's so enriching and wonderful. And the important thing is that it's enjoyment, like it's a way to enjoy yourself, and and without having to go out and buy things. Sure, I like to shop as well. But you don't have to go spend money. You don't. People seek enjoyment and pleasure and fulfillment in so many ways outside of themselves. And our culture makes it really easy, to do that. Like maybe to eating, or I like to eat too. Drinking, shopping, etc. And but this is something that comes from within. It comes from inside of you, and it's yours. And there's no limits, and doesn't cost anything except if you have an instrument. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money on an instrument. You can get used. Lots of good used instruments, and then you just have to put the time into it, because probably like you, Mark, you probably have too. I have spent countless hours in my life practicing.
You practice.
I have.
Perfect practice makes perfect.
Well, we're not there yet.
I keep struggling. Lord knows.
Right. It's a goal.
There you go.
But then you put in the time, and it's really it's like it'll be its own reward, and it's just really a enriching thing to do, and then others can enjoy it. You can bring other people happiness. So, and I feel like humans, like, we're these inherently creative creatures. And sometimes I think in modern society, a lot of that is robbed from us. Like, we are not encouraged to be creative. We're encouraged to be more conformist, and to buckle down and do, get down to business and do what needs to be done. And maybe, kids can do that sort of stuff. But now that I'm,
get serious, get a real job.
Get serious. Get a real job, and cut out that other crap. So
that's right.
But I feel like there's endless reward in maintaining, this sort of activity, and
Well, thank you. You do have you mentioned this, your music on YouTube. You want to plug your channel? How do they find it on YouTube?
Sure. I currently have like 2 subscribers, but that's fine. You can subscribe or not. It doesn't matter. I had a previous one and I deleted it because I believe it had been hacked. So now I'm starting from scratch again. So I'm going to be re-recording some of my songs and putting them up. It is Kathy Dee. And it's just like what you see on the screen, except there's just one word.
Okay. So it's Kathy and D-E-E, not just the letter D for those listeners.
Kathy D, and it's a capital Kathy and then capital D-E-E, but it's all one word.
All one word. Got it.
And believe it or not, there's several other Kathy Dees out there, and there's a couple of people that are musicians.
Oh, there you go.
But they're not me, but
you
have to sift through a lot of stuff on YouTube and,
Right.
But anyway, thank you very much. And I appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you. We do appreciate it. And sharing your journey with us. We're glad that you've done that. We want to thank the listeners for downloading this podcast and coming along for this journey. You can find this podcast at any of your podcast platforms, and we appreciate you taking the time and listening to it today. With that, going out, and let's try to play all the right notes.
You've been listening to The Podium. If you would like to be a guest on The Podium, email the show at onthepodium2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUM2@gmail.com.